Well, this is Fox Sports Lab NFL. It's 11 days to Christmas. My man James Clements is already in the Christmas spirit. He's got the shirt on. He's coming from Christmas party A, B, C, and D. But we're not here to talk Christmas, James. We're here to talk Week 15. How are you?
I'm feeling good, Matty. I'll tell you what, I reckon Santa came a little bit early if you were backing some upsets this week. Jeez. But I mean, look, there's one thing that Patrick Mahomes wants for Christmas this year, I think, and it's like a receiver who can catch a ball and doesn't stink, I guess. Maybe a little bit of love from the refs as well. He had a big sook this week. Yeah, everyone's suddenly turning on the Chiefs. It's all happening, Matty. I'm loving this.
Yeah, actually, I can't say that I'm not that unhappy about that. But anyway, you're right. Week 14 was a week of upsets. In particular, the game that we were concentrating on that we alluded to, we thought the Cowboys, and so did the punters as far as the betting is concerned, would be too good for the Eagles. And now we've got this 10-3, three teams equal with each other in the NFC there. So all of a sudden, that part of the draw, if you like, is well and truly alive.
Yeah, it's like at the top and in the middle, Matty. It's amazing. So you've got all those teams on 10-3, but then remarkably, across both the AFC and the NFC, you've got 13 teams who are either 7-6 or 6-7. It is absolute chaos. Even the NFC South, that horrible division that I've yelled about all season, they've got three teams tied at the top. What is going on, Matty? It's absolute chaos. But what? We saw KC lose. We saw Philly lose. Detroit lose. Miami lose. Jacksonville lose. That's five potential division winners all dropping games in week 14 at a crucial moment, especially that could sort of trip up a lot of the one seed sort of aspirations that teams like Philly might have. But even a team like Detroit, if they could have put this back half of the season together, they would have been flying. But they're now on fraud watch, Matty. Fraud watch for Detroit. Horrible defense. They're looking rubbish. Jacksonville's the same. Their defense was horrible last week, and I'm feeling pretty badly. Trevor Lawrence came back with that high ankle sprain, which it feels like, I don't know, a high ankle sprain is at least a 4-week injury. What are we doing here? But it's all open, I think, at this point. Like, we've got the Niners, who are the best team still, looking very, very, very solid. But a lot of question marks elsewhere. And I guess Dallas winning that game the way they did this week, they're making statements time after time. And I feel like this is where the MVP is going to go, Matty, isn't it? Whoever gets the one seed basically should just be handed the MVP as well, whether it be Purdy, Dak, maybe even like, I don't know, Tua, if the Miami Dolphins can snag that one seed. But I think it's probably Lamar in the AFC that has a crack at Prescott and Purdy. But outside of that, it's absolute chaos.
Yeah, it is. It was a chaos round. Let's get to week 15. We'll start with Thursday night footy, Friday morning our time as always. It's a game that doesn't really going to affect the playoffs. The Chargers and Vegas, they're both 5-8. The spread's just favouring Las Vegas at home, 1.5. And the Chargers, they lose Herbert with a problem with his stick, but they replace him with another stick.
Yeah, Eastern stick, because I guess Western branch wasn't available. It's a very weird one, right? Eastern stick, it's like, we're going to go down. I'm like, I follow a lot of football, Matty. And then you come across some of these backup QBs who I have never heard of this guy. Like, it's just, and he wasn't great, obviously, last week. But this is the tough one. You got 2 5-8 teams. Raiders are at home. Raiders are the obvious sort of pick because at least they've got a hint of sort of continuity, I guess, playing at home. But of course, we saw the Raiders this week lose to the Vikings in one of the lowest scoring games you'll ever see, 3-0. It was 0-0 right down the stretch. The latest a game's been 0-0 in the NFL in like basically the modern history of the NFL.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the Chargers, they scored 7 points. They have managed 13 total points in the last 2 games. If anything, we're going the under, I think, aren't we? Like, it's very much in play.
It's been working for us all season, so let's stick with it.
Especially in prime time. So I think we're still going to go the Raiders with the -1.5. They're slight favorites. The under is a very low 33.5. But the defenses on both sides of the ball are pretty good. So unless there's some big turnovers, I feel like the under is pretty safe. And if you're going to go anybody skill position-wise, it might be just Josh Jacobs on the Raiders just to sort of get over that. If they get down to the red zone, they'll look his way. So, but that's about where it is. It's a bit of a rough one for Friday morning. But the good thing is we've got other really good games the rest of the week.
Well, let's get to the rest of the week. Let's get to what we've got Saturday night games, which is a little bit rare. So we've got 3 games our time Sunday morning, and they're all important games. You talk about all those teams that are around 7-6. You've got the Broncos and the Lions, 7, 6, 9, and 4. You've got the Vikings and the Bengals, same again. Even the Colts and the Steelers, who absolutely stink at the moment. So it's a more important game for the Colts. So this is an important part of the weekend, isn't it?
It really is. Like, when you go through the schedule, you're like, all right, college is over. Cool. We get to have some Saturday night NFL. Fantastic. Usually you get a couple of stinkers, but this is an incredible array of games like Minnesota at Cincy. I'm going to go Cincy -1.5 in that. I think, look, we saw enough from Jake Browning last week
Yeah, we
that,
did.
that they're pretty solid, right? They're just, the Bengals just keep on keeping on against all sort of vibes that you had going into that, going, can they do it 2 times a week? Turns out they can. Minnesota, they've benched Dobbs because he's trying to get Justin Jefferson killed across the middle. They're like, we've seen enough of this. The Josh Dobbs experience. This is the thing. I'm going to talk about Cleveland in a second, but it's basically the Josh Dobbs experience is 4 weeks. He's on a temp contract. Then you boot him out the door. You can't go for more than 4 weeks, Matty. It's simple as that. So I think Cincinnati get the job done there. Pittsburgh, Indy, you mentioned that one too. Indy did not look very good last week.
Yeah.
Had a couple of moments early on, and then they just got ran over. But the Steelers under Mitch Trubisky, like this team is just wayward on offense. The defense can't quite do enough to keep them in these games either. So I'd probably go Indy -1.5. But that has really, really, really big playoff implications, that game.
It does.
And then, of course, Denver, Detroit. Like Detroit, I just called them frauds. So we're going to have to go Denver +3.5 in that one because their defense can at least keep them in this game. Detroit at home scares me a little bit because we've seen Jared Goff outside the confines of Michigan. He's not looking great. So Denver come into this one. I think they can keep this close. Detroit, that defense, it's just too holy for me. So I'm going to go Denver +3.5. Detroit might still win that, but it might be by a field goal. So if you're going to get the +3.5, I'm going to go with that with Denver.
And then we get to early Monday morning or Sunday night games, the regular conference. The 2 late games are the ones we want to talk about. The others don't really have much consequence for the playoff situation, but is there any games that stick out for you, you think, from a betting perspective or you're confident about in those early games?
Yeah, it is actually a slate to have. It's pretty hard to have heaps of confidence in, but there's something like New England hosting Kansas City, where KC have come off a couple of really, really rough offensive outings, as we've seen. The Pats' defense is obviously pretty good. They're keeping teams. They win last week. But this is also the sort of vibe where you go, KC, if they're going to put it together in 1 week, it could be against this Pats team that is just a pop gun offense and won't be able to keep up with them. So even if as long as they get to basically 17 or 24 points, KC should cover that line, which is around 8.5. But this is also the sort of game where you go, if KC just go, right, this is our get right game, we're going to put an absolute whooping on the Pats. And suddenly you turn around and it's 40-3 or something, especially with the Pats, with all the noise about Bill Belichick and, his role after this season. It's all up in the air, apparently. He's on to Kansas City.
He's on to Kansas City.
But I feel like the Pats could be in store for a bit of a shellacking here. There's also Chicago and Cleveland, which is a really interesting game, just for the simple fact that these two defenses are awesome. Like Chicago, if you throw out September, Matty, Chicago actually look half decent. They're still in the hunt. They can still make the play. I love every time we can say in the hunt, I'm all over it. And I think Chicago is still there. Because, of course, they've got Carolina's pick, so they don't want to lose. They're not going to tank. They're going to be going hammer and tongs. And Cleveland, we just mentioned our boy Josh Dobbs with the temp contract. Joe Flacco has been incredible, standing up, stepping up for Cleveland. The wheels could come off in a very bad way, though, for Joe Flacco at any time, right? He's like me. Like, I groan when I get off the couch. I feel like Joe Flacco does the exact same thing. He groans every time they pass him the ball. He's like, I got to throw it. Jeez. So off he goes. I think Chicago can get that one done defensively. So Chicago +2.5. The Rams over the Commanders as well. The Rams look really good this week. Even in that loss to Baltimore, they can really move the ball. -6.5 for the Rams. And then the Niners are 11.5 point favorites in Arizona. I think the Niners, they do have a tendency to play with their food a little bit when it comes to teams that are pretty bad, and Arizona are pretty bad. But 11.5 feels safe enough for me to go the Niners. So I think we'd go KC -8.5, Chicago +2.5, Rams -6.5, and Niners -11.5. But then you've got the big one, Matty.
Well, let's get to that game at 8:30 our time on Monday morning. The Cowboys 10-3. You mentioned, we talked about how well Dak's playing. The Bills are hanging in there, but the Bills are at home, so they get the 1.5 point spread there. And then the later game, of course, is the Ravens, as you talked about. They're going along quite nicely up against the Jags, who I think need to make a statement there. The Ravens -3.5 there. So, the Ravens can really shore up that number 1 seed or strengthen it anyway.
They really can. I think so. Dallas-Buffalo is a fantastic matchup. I think, look, in terms of that awesome Dallas defense, they still get into shootouts. So I think this game should be absolutely a rip snorter. I think we can go the over as well there, the 50.5. CD Lamb is probably my anytime touchdown scorer for that. He's scored in 5 straight.
Yeah, he's been good.
The yards have sort of been up and down for him as well, though. So he had an amazing stretch in the middle of the season, of course. But I think in 3 of the last 4, he's not sort of topping that 80-yard mark, but he is getting in the end zone. So I'm all over CD Lamb there. And of course, Stephon Diggs for the Buffalo Bills. Like every time Josh Allen's trying to do something, he's looking for Diggs. Maybe sometimes to his detriment. I think they bounce back at home, but I do think Dallas get the win. This should be an absolute cracker. So we're going to go Dallas plus 1.5, the over 50.5 CD, and Stephon Diggs for touchdowns. And as you mentioned, Baltimore, Jacksonville. This should be a Baltimore win. It should be. But they're really getting themselves into a lot of mess late in games, Matty. It's very weird. And like we know that John Harbaugh is a very good coach, but they do let teams back into it. I'm tempted to go Jacksonville plus 3.5, where Baltimore can probably just eke out the win. And we'll still go the over as well, because I think 7 of 8 Jags home games have gone over. Actually, yes, December games, I think, for the Jags, that they've just continued to hit the over. Basically, it gets late in the season. They're like, caution to the wind, away they go. The Ravens are only allowing 16.8 points, but I think, again, we saw the Rams slice and dice them up. Trevor Lawrence could probably do the same. So I think we'll see OBJ get in for another touchdown. Jags are 31st against the pass in the NFL. So look for the air. But I think there'll be points. I think the Jags can cover this spread, though.
All right, and finally, to finish off Monday Night Footy, the Eagles 10-3. They've lost their last 2. They come up against the Seahawks, who are struggling a little bit at the moment. The Eagles get a 4.5-point spread. And all of a sudden, as we touched on earlier, the Eagles in the number 5 seed.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, to be honest, apart from the idea of having home field advantage essentially throughout the playoffs, I don't think the Eagles would be too sad at being the 5 seed, because that first round matchup would be probably against the winner of the NFC South, and they'd be just like licking their lips at that one. But the problem is you go on the road for the playoffs, so they want to win out. This is the tough part. This is obviously the toughest part of their schedule. This is the end of their gauntlet on the road in Seattle. If Geno Smith is actually healthy and plays in this one, I actually really like the Seahawks plus 4.5, because we've seen this Eagles defense with plenty of holes, especially in the secondary. And now they go up against a team that has DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and stuff like that. So I feel like we'll see DK get in for a touchdown, but AJ Brown for the Eagles as well should score, because the Seattle defense, again, is pretty holy itself. So again, we don't see too many shootouts on the old Monday Night Football. We've seen a lot of unders hit this year, but I think this might be one of the few that sort of goes over just because of the defensive woes on both sides. So I'm tempted to go Seattle plus 4.5. If Philly win, they probably grind it out. It's hard to see them smashing a team, especially with the way their defense is sitting. So it's going to set it up very, very nicely heading into the week after that, though, Matty.
All right, mate. We're out of time, but also we're going to have a couple of weeks break and come back around playoff time, mate. So have a wonderful holiday period. Stay safe and enjoy yourself, mate.
Will do. I'll be knocking back a few eggnogs, watching a lot of NFL. It should be pretty good, I'll tell you.
And there is the quote for the year. I'll be knocking back a few eggnogs. We are going to have a couple of weeks break over the Christmas period, but we'll be back. As James has touched on, we're headed for an unbelievable playoff series where things can go in any direction. Stay safe, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.
You win some, you lose more. For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.